I just want to start out this video saying, I hope everyone's okay. The world is crazy, crazy, crazy right now. I put something on Facebook about a week or so ago saying that I just couldn't deal with it anymore and got a lot of outpouring. And since I've done the last video, I've had people say, I'm really struggling and I don't know what to do. And one of the reasons that I do so much about economics and about not socialism, but about how we need to look out for each other is because I very much feel that this focus on the individual is not just about money and wealth. It's also about having us suffer alone rather than reaching out to each other as community. Many of us have been alienated from our religious institutions because they have moved so far to the right. And we don't have many institutions in our society right now that promote the common good. So I just want to say that if you are struggling, I see you, I hear you. Other people see you and hear you. We are living through a world that is crazy, crazy right now and suffering, being sad, being anxious. All of those things are normal reactions. And so feel good or don't feel good. Take care of yourselves and watch the video. In 2012, as a Republican presidential candidate, Mitt Romney flew to Israel to boost his foreign policy bona fides and, of course, raise money from rich dual citizen Israelis. He told the crowd, which paid $25,000 a head, that their wealth and the success of Israel as a country was cultural and evidence of the hand of providence. In other words, God looks favorably on some people and unfavorably on others. This argument no doubt played well to the audience of well-off American Jews. We are the chosen people, after all. God said so. Or someone of importance in the Torah said so. I could never actually get it straight. As a child, every time I would hear someone say that we were the chosen people, I would think, chosen for what? Romney wasn't content simply to point out the cultural superiority he perceived in U.S. and Israeli Jews and presumably rich Mormons like himself. He told the crowd, and this is a really weird quote, but he told the crowd, you see, the GDP per capita, for instance, in Israel, which is about $21,000, and compare that with the GDP per capita across the areas managed by the Palestinian Authority, which is more like $10,000. And then he added, you notice such a dramatically stark difference in economic vitality. And that is also between other countries that are near or next to each other, Chile and Ecuador, Mexico and the United States. There is so much bullshit to unpack in that statement, I don't know where to begin. We can start with the fact that the areas managed by the Palestinian Authority means the West Bank. He didn't even mention Gaza, which had been governing itself per se since 2005. And per se, I mean a mafioso-like ruling body that had grown out of the poverty and degradation that we have been taught to associate with the Warsaw Ghetto in the early 1940s. We can also point out that the West Bank, though under Palestinian Authority control, was also at that moment being colonized by religious Israelis with the blessing of their government. Walls have been built to bisect towns so that Palestinians have to go through Israeli checkpoints to visit family and friends. And let's not forget that many Americans who move to Israel do so because of their hard right religious leanings. They not only believe in the hand of providence, but that the hand of providence is woven into their kippahs. Romney credits the theme of this 2012 speech to David Landy's The Wealth and Poverty of Nations, a book which made me so angry I stopped reading about halfway through, and which I describe as the even more racist academic apologia for Ayn Rand. Landy's, a former Harvard professor, essentially argues that white Europeans were culturally superior to dark-skinned people they colonized in the global South, and that superiority manifested in money and wealth. The subtitle of his book may as well have been, "The British and Dutch were more refined than the people they slaughtered." As I was reading this book in the aughts, I would look up every once in a while and see the row of Dickens books in my bookcase, the very bookcases behind me now. Both authors were writing about the same period of time in the same cities, and yet Dickens's depiction of wealth and poverty differed exponentially from the same culture that Landy's lauded as industrious and prosperous. I mean, I suppose the Artful Dodger was industrious, even if he was sleeping in the streets? Right now, I'm reading current Harvard professor Michael Sandel's The Tyranny of Merit, in which he argues that mankind's fear of some divine hand of nature, drought, disease, crystallized after the Protestant Reformation as an even stronger notion of good versus evil. As Sandel noted, this reflects the belief that the moral universe is arranged in a way that aligns prosperity with merit and suffering with wrongdoing. So, Romney's extrapolated argument goes, the people in the West Bank and Gaza are just inherently unworthy and suffer because of that. And the people who are taking their land and herding them into what has been described as the world's largest open-air prison are worthy because they are not suffering. They are winning. Which is why I think the October 7th Hamas terror attacks have unsettled so many around the world in a way that, say, the raising of Nagorno-Karabakh just weeks prior did not. It upsets our international internal order, which, as Romney noted, takes as truth that Jews are better than Muslims, that the U.S. is better than Mexico, and that Ecuador and Chile are neighbors. New York Times columnist Nicholas Kristof calls the view that Israelis' lives are more valuable than Palestinian lives a moral miscalculation in the current war. This is the quote, "Israel has suffered a horrifying terrorist attack and deserves the world's sympathy and support, but it should not get a blank check to slaughter civilians or to deprive them of food, water, and medicine." This is exactly how people in the U.S., who have always been taught that Americans are chosen, reacted to 9/11. There's this sense of, how dare they? There's this sense of revenge or proving to the world that we are better by, in fact, acting worse. How dare people from Central America cross our borders? We must kill them with spikes in our rivers and rip their infants out of their arms. Don't they know we're better? How dare you suggest government policies should help people? Don't you know those people will just use that money for drugs? Just as in 9/11, when those unspeakably brutal murders happened in southern Israel on October 7th, the world was aghast and in sympathy with Israel. And just as after 9/11, if Israel exerts the revenge it says it's going to, the world will go back to seeing them the way they see the U.S., arrogant, murderous, self-absorbed. The sad part is that many of the Israelis who were murdered and taken hostage are supporters of peace. They are kibbutzniks, or in U.S. parlance, socialists. Many of the relatives of the hostages don't want Israel to put at risk the 1 million children living in Gaza, almost 2,000 of whom have been killed in the last 2.5 weeks. And if the hostages die, their families will blame their government, the Israeli government, not Hamas. I feel like we're in some sort of inflection point, but I also feel like it's a test we're likely to fail. As Romney demonstrated 11 years ago, our entire Western civilization and economy is based on the notion that some people are better than others, even if they're children. Thank you for watching the Overthinking video this week. It's been actually getting a lot of good attention, and I appreciate it. Most of you are subscribers. Most of you are free subscribers, but we have a pretty well-growing, I don't even know what that means, cadre of paid subscribers, and I would like to get more and more. I am making my living off of this, so the more people who subscribe, the less I have to freelance and not think about what I want to say and do in this Substack. You can subscribe by hitting the subscribe button below. It's $7 a month or $70 a year. You can also subscribe by hitting the Ko-Fi button below that and give whatever you want on a monthly basis, on a one-time basis, whatever is good for you. I'm just asking for your support. Thanks.